Hello, everyone. It's me, Andrew. Hopefully, you all are doing well out there and that you are having a good start to your week. It's Tuesday. It's super sunny and beautiful here in lovely Ligonier, Pennsylvania. Um, yeah, it's a little chilly, but it's really beautiful out. I was so tempted looking out the window to do some yard work today. Um, but I need to catch up on getting all the kits from Kittapalooza all kitted up. It's taking a wee bit longer for me to do it than I thought because we didn't have power at the cottage over the weekend. So I couldn't kind of work after every night. But uh, Luckily, we're still on track. Um, Barb usually comes in on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. So I've got until tomorrow morning to get everything ready so that they can all start going out the door. And I feel like I can do it. So I'm not, uh, you know, I like to build timelines in for myself because I feel like I work better that way. I don't know about you. What about you? Do you like to have, I mean, I try to make it so I have as few deadlines as possible in my life, but I also work well if I have a structure and a timeline and I can kind of budget how much everything's going to cost or take. And so that's what I do. Um, Anyways, if you're watching, say hello and maybe where you're watching from. We always like to do a little bit of a little chat in the beginning of our videos, our live streams, so that everybody can kind of trickle in. If you would be so kind to share the video, that's awesome. You know, William is so much better at asking for people to like and share our posts. So let's see who's watching. I see a couple of people are tuning in. Michelle's watching. Hey, Michelle. She says, hi, Andrew and fur babies. The fur babies are sitting in the sunshine, luxuriating in front of the windows. Vivian says, good day to you, Andrew. Hi, how are you? Hopefully you're doing well. Michelle says, hi, AG Bead fam. Marianne is watching. Hi, Marianne. Norma's watching. Hi, Norma. Fran is watching. Hi, Fran. Teresa's watching. Marianne says, did you get a spot for the course you wanted to take? So, for those of you who are not friends with me on my personal timeline, I was talking about that. And so the story behind that is this is kind of a busy time of year because it's when all of the grants and scholarships and different things, our applications are due. A lot of them, anyways, for for the for this summer, the spring/summer sessions. So I've been filling out all kinds of grants and scholarships and different things. Um, we we live pretty humbly ourselves. So any help with scholarships and grants to offset educational costs is always welcome. Uh, uh, um, I really believe in education and the power of education and how we can enrich ourselves. And so I always try to put an effort into doing that. And so I was super lucky and I won a grant from the Society of Inclusive Blacksmiths. And at the time when I had filled out the application for it, um, I had made sure to check that the class had plenty of space in it that I was applying for. And at the time it did. But what I have a feeling what happened is the program or the organization that was hosting the teacher that I wanted to take, they have their own internal scholarship process. And I feel like, because I feel like they release those at the time that I was signing up for the class. So what that meant is that there were a bunch of spots, and then overnight there were no spots. So more like a couple days there were no spots, and I kind of noticed this because the website was down over the weekend when I was trying to apply or trying to sign up for that spot. So unfortunately, I don't think that I got the class that I wanted to take. And it's kind of like a comedy of errors because I was trying to take the workshop at Touchstone, and unfortunately, it didn't run. And so that also may be a reason why people kind of all jumped on. That's another way that that could have happened, is that if they, if you don't have enough students, or there's something, if the weekend is a bad weekend, sometimes it kind of so it'll make classes so they don't run. And then if it's a really well-known instructor and they're coming back to the area, sometimes the people who, excuse me, wanted to take that workshop somewhere else will then go to the other place where they are running it. So unfortunately, no, I did not. Probably there was a very slim chance that they pulled the spot for me, but I don't think that they did. Which it's not the end of the world. The money, I still can use the money, and I still can take a class. I have to take a blacksmithing class, which is exciting. So if I don't take it at the Center for Metal Arts, I can take it at Touchstone. I do have to use it within this calendar year, but that shouldn't be a problem. Um, I've got a couple more irons in the fire, no pun intended, with different opportunities over the summer. So I'm super excited about that. Hopefully they pan out. I may be begging people for recommendation letters pretty soon because, you know, that's still a thing nowadays. So we'll see how that goes. All right. I see a couple more people watching. Vivian says, watching from chilly Idaho. Well, stay warm. Hopefully it's chilly here too, but it's sunny, so it kind of tricks you. Um, William is at his other job today, and I was gonna go with him in the morning to pick up the van because the power's back on at the cottage. But unfortunately, uh, I stayed up. Well, I guess fortunately, I stayed up too late packing kits last night. So he's like, "You wanna come with me this morning and to pick up the car?" And I was like, Paula's watching. Hey, Paula. June is watching. Hi, June. Michelle said she shared and liked or thumbs up. Thank you. Vivian says, congratulations on your grant. Thanks. Um, One of the things people always ask me is, how come you win so many things? And the truth of it is that I actually don't win that much, but I apply to a ton of things. So the things I do win, it looks like I'm always winning things. But in actuality, I win probably maybe 20% of the things. Um, and sometimes you have to apply several times before they kind of recognize your name. And, it's one of those things. So, anyways, thanks so much. I appreciate it. I feel really fortunate and I'm very grateful. I'm super excited about hopefully representing the Society of Inclusive Blacksmiths in diversifying the blacksmith world. Um, Over the pandemic, during lockdown, we were forced to kind of sit and pause and take stock of our lives. And one of the things that I had always wanted to do was go back to school, and get like an MFA. But when I had left or had finished my BFA, had so much student loan debt, and you kind of get caught up in life. And so at the time, I was working in the restaurant industry, and I was working like crazy amounts. I was pulling doubles almost every day, and it's one of those things where it becomes less possible, like logistically. And so then when we moved to Pennsylvania and we started the store, that kind of took over. And I think in some ways it was something that I needed to happen. Because when I was in school, a lot of voices kind of happened in my head, not in like in a mental illness way, but in a kind of a like you work so closely with different people that you start doing things, and you start like there's a little person in your head that you can almost hear them critiquing your work, or talking about this theory or that theory. And I sort of felt like I needed time to reset and kind of find my own creative voice again and find the joy in making things. There's a wonderful book by Steve Martin. Yes, that's Steve Martin. He's actually a really influential collector and author, and he wrote a really beautiful book called An Object of Beauty. And in that, he talks about like commodifying your artwork and kind of the perils of that. And so, anyways, I kind of felt like I was burnt out and needed time to kind of get back in touch with myself. So after we moved to Pennsylvania and we started the store, I kind of put my own career on the back burner as far as my art career and my educational pursuits. So for one, we didn't have the money. And the other thing is we just didn't have time. So um I don't think I was really ready yet. So for a long time, that's what we did. All we did is just work and work and work and try to build up the store and get it to a point where, we could live off of it. And we're super lucky and super thankful that our small business supports our livelihood, and that we've been able to kind of make this little life. So thank you all of you out there for empowering us to be able to do that. Um, and then, so when the pandemic happened, we had to, ask ourselves what we wanted in life. And so we had a lot of conversations, a lot of deep conversation, a lot of crying and carrying on like that. Because you couldn't really leave or go anywhere. That was during that time period. And one of the things that I really kind of settled on is I wanted to learn more. I'm at a point in my life where going back for an MFA doesn't necessarily make sense for me. Like, I would love to do it. It's just logistically, it doesn't necessarily align. And the goal for getting an MFA usually is if you're going to go into like academia and you want to teach like at a collegiate level, or in schools in the school system. And so I don't really necessarily need to go down that route. So what I decided instead of trying to find an MFA program, was to look at the different places where I could get education, and build my skill set in a kind of low impact way. And so that's when I started researching places like the Center for Metal Arts and Touchstone and Contemporary Craft, and taking classes online. and doing things with metalworks. And so my goal, and I've kind of talked about this before, is to deepen and kind of broaden my relationship with metal. And so as a jewelry artist. And so, because I've always kind of winged it and kind of dabbled, but I never really kind of invested that much serious time into developing my metalworking skills. Um, so a lot of what I've done has been self-taught. Now, I did get a BFA from the School of Visual Arts in New York City, and so I learned a lot about like color and color theory and composition and art history and contemporary art and things like that. But they really didn't specialize in that kind of work, and at that time, I wasn't really making that kind of work anyway. So anyways, long story short, or long story long, I started taking classes and researching different places I could take classes and how to make that doable. And so I apply for grants and scholarships, and I look for every which way that I can take classes for inexpensive. And so I do a lot of stuff like sometimes I'll trade with an artist, or or we'll do a skill share. um, and I've been more dedicated towards learning and kind of developing in that way. So long story long, thank you. I feel really fortunate to be able to do this. um, and we're lucky enough that if I do take a week to take a class, we have the support system in place that we can do that. Like for a long time, logistically, we just couldn't do it. We had one car that we were sharing that was sometimes reliable and sometimes not reliable. And we didn't have the money, and I was working freelance in addition to working at the store. And so we just couldn't do it earlier before. But we're finally reaching a point where I have a little bit more flexibility that we can take classes and do different things, and get in touch with what's going to make me happy in life. And I feel like for me, I'm one of those people who is constantly curious. Um, and maybe that makes me a little bit of a nerd. I'm okay with that. But I think that curiosity makes me an avid student. And I know this probably sounds bad, and like I'm self-deprecating myself. But I'm a little bit of a slow learner. And what I mean by that is that I don't pick things up quick. Like William, when he sits down in a class, he picks things up quick and he just like speeds through it. And he's like, look at this ring I made. And I'm over here just like finally bending the wire around. But for me, I kind of learn in a very kind of slow and methodical and kind of careful way, where I have to build up muscle memory and I have to absorb things by doing things. And it just takes longer. But once it's there, once it's in here, it stays in there. So even though I'm not necessarily a quick learner, I end up retaining a lot of stuff. So yeah. Anyways, yeah. So that's what that's all about. I don't know if y'all wanted to hear all that, but that's what's happening in our lives right now. Harry says hello. Hi, Harry. Vivian says, "Oh, backing up. Now it seems like you didn't get what you wanted. It's okay. I kind of got what I wanted, but kind of not. So it'll be fine." Donna says, "Hello, Andrew. Nice to see you. Thank you for the beautiful combinations you put together. Oh, I'm glad you like them. Um, some of them, and if you don't know what Donna's talking about, we just finished up Kittapalooza 2023, maybe spring edition. Maybe we'll do it more. Um, the first time we did Kittapalooza, we did over 100 kits, And within those kits, sometimes I would do, one kit I did like 50 kits, and one kit I did 25. And, there were literally thousands of kits that I made. And that broke my brain a little bit, by the way. So this time we did it in a little bit more of a manageable way. We did 50 kits over 5 days, so there's 10 days. If you are curious about any of those kits, you can either go to our Facebook Live kind of playlist, and William has made it very easy to find Kidapalooza Day 1, Day 2, Day 3, Day 4, and Day 5. Day 4 was a little bit rocky, or Day 3, I don't know what day it was, but we had some power issues and the weather and the wind and all of that. You can also find that on YouTube. And now all of the kits are now live on our website, and that's allegorygallery.com. So if you're looking for the Kidapalooza kits, it's right there on the homepage. It should be right near the top-ish somewhere in there. That's probably really, really awesome descriptions there. But anyway, so those are on the website. A bunch of them have sold out. So if you are waiting, I would not suggest waiting too long, because they might all sell out, or not. If they all sold out, I would throw a parade in the street in our front yard. But I doubt that they will all completely sell out, because there's just so many of them. But if you are looking for specific ones, those ones might sell out. So, I understand sometimes finances can be tough, but if anybody understands that, that's me. But there are things that are very limited quantity at this point. So I don't want to pressure you, but I just want to let you know that there's only so many. And if you wait, then they may go away. And then I don't want you to have the deep sadness in your heart for missing out. I still remember things. I'm one of those people. I don't have a photographic memory, but I do remember things very vividly, like missing out on that strand of black tourmaline for $9.95 at the Gem Mall about 10 years ago. And I was like, oh, I'll just go get that when I'm on my way back. And then I didn't get it. And then I had the deep sadness for a decade. It's okay. I'm working through it. Lorraine is watching. Hey, Lorraine. Marion says short courses are a great way to learn new skills. Yeah, I love the idea of doing long format. It's just not as easy when you have a small business and you're doing stuff, and we volunteer for things, and we help a lot of different things. So our days are kind of double stuffed as they are. So long format, I would love to do that. I would love to just, I think one of the things I didn't appreciate when I was in school is that was one of the times that I had, and I was working at the time and I worked a lot, but it was one of the times where my whole main focus was empowering myself, educating myself, and having time dedicated just to learn. Um, and I think as I got older, I started to appreciate more of that, because when I was younger, I didn't really think about that. But now I think of it as such a wonderful gift of that time, that dedicated time. And so I would love to go back. It's just not possible. Like there are these workshops at Penland, and they look so awesome, but they're 6 weeks. And I'm like, how am I gonna do 6 weeks? That's a long time. Amanda's watching. Hi, Amanda. Linda is watching. Gumnut. gun. Um, mm, um, I see a couple different things. Michelle says, I know I'm going to be spending more money on delicates. Oh, good. Janice says, hi. Hi, Janice. All right, so let's jump into it. Um, I've kind of taken you around this meandering trip of my current educational pursuits, whether you liked it or not. Um, and so let's do this. So let's flip the camera around. You're going to see the ceiling for a second. I'm not at the cottage today because we have the van is still at the cottage. And I was supposed to pick it up with William this morning, but I didn't. So I'm doing this from here. So there is a point in this tutorial where I'm going to be using a 24 gauge, but in real life, I would use a thicker gauge and it would probably be like 20 gauge. But I don't have that here with me. So, yeah, so we're just gonna have to work with what we've got and use our imagination station on how we can do that with a thicker gauge wire later. All right, so I'm going to remind folks if they didn't have a chance to like and share these videos. William says you have to say it, and so I said it and I said it twice, so I think that counts for 4 times, right? Isn't that how that math works? All right, so I'm going to flip the camera. So hopefully you all are doing well out there today. William, he did a lovely tutorial or live presentation yesterday on jewelry making tools. I love tools. I am an avid tool collector, among other things. So I love tools. I am like you know, it's it's a little bit of an obsession, I know. Um, and it's all right. It could be drugs. Books. I collect books. I collect beads. I collect tools, and I comfort myself with saying that it could be like something else, and at least I have something. And if I ever die, William, he can have like a bunch of tools and books and beads to sell off and have a vacation or something. I don't know. Not to bring it down a notch. But anyways, so today, the main thing that we're going to be using today is this cone from the Allegory Gallery Fine Pewter Collection. This is in the antique gold finish. These are available on our website at allegorygallery.com. If you type in cone in the search bar, it should come right up. And there are some smaller ones, but this is the one that we're going to be using. I'm going to show you this next to a penny, so you get the compare and contrast. This is a larger one. It is approximately it's approximately 24 millimeters. Um, It's just shy of an inch. And then the bottom hole, um, actually, in theory, you should have it where you measure it like this, but I'm going to measure it like this, is about 12 millimeters. And then this is a great big ample hole, and that's going to be about 3 or 4 millimeters there. All right, and this is a Bali inspired one. This has granulation, which if you don't know what that is, it's when you take little balls of metal and then you either fuse it to the surface of the metal where you solder it down. And what these are done is they take this very intricate wire and granulation, and they use this stuff called hide glue, um, which is made basically from taking some kind of skin and boiling it down until it makes glue, and then putting that in water, and then um, using that to hold them in place. The other thing that they'll use instead of hide glue is they'll use spit. I took a workshop on granulation, and I'm not super squeamish, um, but I got a little bit queasy by the end of it. Everybody spitting in cups and stuff, and I was like, "Oh boy, here we go." But anyways, we're not going to be doing that. That was the original, and then the original was cast in this fine pewter, which makes it more affordable and more accessible. And yeah, so that's what we're going to be using for our cap today for our tassel. Now, we're also going to be using some ribbon. I have this very fun ribbon that's in a rainbow color. I like it. Now, depending on uh, the ribbon that you choose or the fiber you choose, it will have a different look. You can use wax linen, you can use all kinds of stuff. Um, Now, if you can use embroidery floss, you can use chain, but the how to do it with chain is a little bit different. And I can maybe, if y'all want, I can do a demo on how to do one with chain if you want to see that. It's basically the same, but there is a slight difference. So this is a really fun rainbow one ribbon that I have. I use this whenever we do shows. I like to. We have these paper bags that have the definition of allegory stamped on them, and then I cut off a little piece and tie a little bow on the handle of the bag. For one, it makes me know that somebody's paid, because sometimes I'll get in a hat and I get in a bad habit of talking, and I'll forget if somebody paid or not. But I know that if I see the bow on their bag, that means they've paid. And then the other thing is that it's fun. It's festive. It adds a little pop of color, and I think it's one of those things when you put that little handmade touch into that kind of customer service experience, people really appreciate that. Or maybe they don't, but in my mind, I think they do. So, anyways, so we're gonna be using this, and if we make a necklace, I've got this antique kind of brass colored chain that kind of goes with this. It's a little bit darker than the cone, but that's fine. Um, and For our tools, I need a cutter, and I need um, a chain nose pliers, a round nose pliers, and I also will need a bead of some sort. Um, and usually I like to get it so that um, I've got this little, maybe, I think it's a 6 millimeter um, round or a check glass druck. I'm going to use that. I don't know if you can see that or not. All right. Janice says, I love this ribbon. I have 4 different spools and different shades of colors. Oh, good. Yeah, I went to the Maryland Sheep and Wool festival once. And if you've never gone, it's super cool. It's a fiber palooza. We also, I don't know if y'all know this or not, but we have fiber cards on our website. At least I think we do. At some point we did. And those fiber cards are really great for projects like this because you get enough that you can do with this project and then some, but you don't necessarily have to buy like a whole entire skein. or spool, and you only make one project. So if you want to kind of experiment with working with fibers, or you want to work with eyelash yarn or some kind of, curly Q yarns, the fiber cards are really wonderful, and they come in a bunch of different colorways, and I think they're fun. So the reason why I have those is because when we went to the Maryland Sheep and Wool festival. Um, I really wasn't. I worked a little bit in fibers, but not like a lot. So I was like, I had all these ideas in my mind that I was going to be making, like knitting things and crocheting things. And we, at the time, we were next to a knitting shop, and so I would go over there, and I took some classes there. Um, some really basic things. Um, and then so I went to the Maryland Sheep and Wolf um, uh, festival, and I bought like one skein of each of these really fun, cool colors and different textures and stuff. And then when I started getting to making things, I realized that if I wanted to make more than like a hot pad or two, I needed to get more. And so that was a beginner mistake, because what I realized eventually is that sometimes things come in dye lots. And even if you get the same color, if you don't get it from the same dye lot, it can look different. So that's cool if you want to do like an ombre or something. But if you want something to be all one color, then you may luck out, you may not. So anyways, I ended up with a bunch of skeins and spools, and that I really liked the fibers, but I didn't really have a big use for them. So we decided to make them into fiber cards, and sometimes they're very popular. One time we took them to a show and they sold out, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And then the next show we brought them, and I didn't even sell one. We keep them in this shop, and sometimes we have them online. We had a really fun little project, making a little sheep, um, and you kind of wrap it around the little cutout of the sheep, and then you hot glue, a um, a little pin back on, and it makes a little fun pin. Anyways, so that's how we ended up with a bunch of these fiber. And then plus, I am a collector, as I've mentioned before, of many things, and that's one of the many things. So in addition to the cone, a bead, and some kind of fiber, and there are tools, we'll need wire. And as I've mentioned earlier, I would have if I did this for real, I probably would have used a slightly heavier gauge wire. This is just some brass wire that we have at the house that I was rummaging around. This is 24 gauge. It works. However, I like a little bit more heft when it comes to kind of bales and things like that. Now, if I was doing like earrings and this cone was a wee bit smaller, I might use this, but for the scale of this cone, I probably would use a little bit thicker gauge of a wire. Um, and just so you know, the lower the number is, the thicker the wire. And what that means is there's a thing called a draw plate. And basically, it's like a board or a metal board or whatever. And it's got holes all drilled into it. And they're different sizes of holes. And so when they're making wire, you start with an ingot of metal, and you can pour it into a mold, and that makes an ingot. So you heat the metal up, and you pour it into the mold, and you come out with this little chunk of metal. And then the key to this, to making good wire, which I learned after the fact, is that you have to compress the structure or grain of the metal by hitting it. The first time I did it, I didn't really do as much as I probably should have, and it kind of made some fragile wire. But anyway, so you pull it through the draw plates, and depending on how many times they pull it through the draw plates, correlates to how thick the wire is. So if you didn't know how wire was made, that's how it's made. That's the um, 20-second version of something that takes all day and is a super pain in the butt. And like, I don't get it. I guess if you were like really into using like every scrap of metal and not refining it and like doing all the refining yourself, then maybe, but in my world, it's just so much easier just to buy it. But I guess in the old times, you if you wanted like wire, you had to make it yourself. So I guess that's why there's a tradition behind that. My tradition is going on the internet and pushing buy now. Um, but anyways, I digress. All right, so I'm gonna cut some of this off. I'm gonna cut off approximately 4 inches or so. I'm going to be generous with myself, so that I don't end up shortchanging how much I need later on. Because, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it definitely is easier if you give yourself enough material to work with in advance. So I use my cutters to cut this. It's approximately 4 inches. I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and I'm going to come down about 1.5 inches or so, and I'm just going to bend it and make a hook. All right. So I've got this like hook of a wire. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'm going to hold this off to the side, and that's going to hang out. Now it's ribbon time. So I've got my ribbon, and this all depends on how much of a tassel you want to make. So if you want a really long tassel, you're going to have to figure something out, wrapping around a book or something. But I kind of use my hand as my guide. So I lay this like so in the palm of my, or whatever this part of your hand is called. I think of this as more the palm, but this is like, what's that? I don't know. Reverse knuckle, other side knuckle. I don't know. So I'm going to hold this like this. I'm making sure that the tip comes down at the end here, like so. And this doesn't necessarily matter a whole lot, but it does help later on, and you'll kind of see why. So what I do is I gently wrap this around. If I have to straighten any wire or any of the ribbon out, I'll straighten it out as I go, because sometimes it gets crinkled. I don't want to put too much pressure, because if you put too much pressure, what's going to happen is your loops are going to get smaller and smaller as you go. So the first loop will be great big, and then the subsequent loops will be kind of um, uh, Marion says upper palm. What is this called? The Mound of Venus and palmistry. I don't know what these are called. In theory, I should know. At one point, I knew. I don't remember any of that. It went away. So I'm going to wrap this around my hand. And depending on how many times you wrap it around your hand will determine how full your tassel is. All right. So if you wrap your hand this around many, many times, you're going to get very full, kind of floofy, bigger tassel. So just keep that in mind. And so I'm kind of spreading my fingers out a little bit, you'll notice, so that I keep that tension kind of right. I don't want to have it where it keeps getting smaller and smaller. I want it to kind of be all one thing. Now, if you didn't want to use your hand, you could definitely use something else. I like this because it's attached to my body and I can, it's there, so why not? And so what I'm gonna do now, and also I should mention this, is that because this is a bigger cone, you can get a bigger tassel in there. If you use a really small tassel, if you make a great big thing, it's gonna look kind of weird. It's gonna be more of a pom pom than a tassel, and that's fine. You just have to be aware of that. So I've got this here like so. I flip my hand over so that you can kind of see it a little bit easier. And I'm gonna get some really sharp scissors, and you have to be careful. Don't cut yourself um, with your scissors. All right. So I've got them. I'm gonna flip this back around so you get the front side. And I'm gonna take this hook that we made and I'm going to slip it underneath the um, the ribbons that I've wrapped around my hand. All right. And I'm gonna try to be mindful not to go through the ribbons because this has a little bit of a more open weave to it. And I'm just gonna pull this up like so. All right. And I'm going to be kind of careful because I don't want it to kind of go all higgledy-piggledy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross this over like so. And I'm going to be pretty tight about it. I don't want this to come loose. This is all that's holding this on. So and then I'm going to take my pliers and wrap it. Now, pliers are really wonderful because if you they allow you to get into places that you normally can't get in if you have larger fingers, but also because they are they're metal, they're harder than your fingers. Um Unless you're like Wolverine or something, you can get really in there and uh uh work on the torque of your piece. So I'm just kind of loosely, aka not loosely, but tightly wrapping this around, and this is going to help hold my piece, my tassel together. Now, before I get to the very end, because I've got a little piece here that's sticking out, I'm going to gently turn that in so that it's curving with my spiral or my coil. And as I pull this tighter, it's going to nestle into my wire coil. Now, another thing that you can do is if you have more time and you want to wait, you can take a little bit of fabric glue and put a dab of that in there, and that's really going to lock it in place. The thing about this though is that if you do that, you can make a huge mess. And I've seen people do it. I have done it myself, and you get glue all up in here and it's less than delightful. Um, I mean, it says in terms of hardness, what is the solid brass wire like compared to German wire or pear wire? So the in terms of hardness, it's a little bit harder. It's a little bit of a stiffer wire. This is a dead soft wire, but I like it. It is harder. Whenever you're working with um, a lot of those will have a kind of a base metal core or a copper core, and it is softer than the alloy of brass. Brass is a little bit harder. You'll see, like when they do pattern plates, a lot of times they'll be made of steel, or for softer metals, they'll be made of brass. It is a little bit harder. It's still easy to work with in the hand, but just so you know, that's what that is. Facebook user says, "What you making?" I'm making a ribbon tassel. All right, so I've got my cone here, and I'm going to insert this into there. And see, I've wrapped this a couple times. I like that. That looks fun. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to string my bead on, And this is going to help it from sliding back through the cone. And I picked this color because you can see it on camera for one. But wouldn't that be cool with like a little AB crystal or something? I think that'd be super, super charming. So now you have a couple different options. If you wanted to just put this on a chain, you don't even need a clasp at that point if you do an over the head, but you could put this on there and wire that on and you're done. What? Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my round nose pliers. I'm going to go up probably, oh, half an inch or so and bend it over. And you're going to get that kind of a hook. And then I'm going to put this back in and I'm going to wrap this around. And it's going to look a little bit like he's doing a karate pose. I'm going to put this in here like so. Now, this is not how a lot of people wire wrap. I know. And then I'm going to kind of turn it so that it's at a 90-degree angle, and then I can wrap it around and do a regular coil. Because this is a finer gauge wire, and I don't necessarily like that. Usually, like I said earlier, I would do this in a little bit of a heavier wire for a bail. If you do have a smaller, if you do have it where it's thinner, you can always wrap it around twice. You can do it 3 times if you wanted. There's enough material. The only thing that you have to kind of be mindful of, for one, is that you still are always going to have just one 24 gauge wire being your core of that. And I mean, that's not the end of the world, but I would, if I did this for real, I would definitely use a little bit of a heavier gauge wire. All right, so I'm going to take my pliers. I know some people, they like to use their fingers. I don't like to use my fingers. I always just grab my pliers because when you go to cut the limes for your margarita, sometimes this is sharp and you can get micro cuts on your fingers. And then there's sadness and tears of burning hellfire as you're cutting those limes or those lemons to make that lemonade. That citric acid's going to get in there. All right. And then before I'm done, I'm going to kind of turn that in towards the coil and then just slightly press that into my cap, right? And I'm going to press this evenly. And then here's a trick. If you're using round nose pliers and your bail has a smaller side and a bigger side, go through and just twist it lightly and then go through on the other side and do the same. And then that will help even it out. All right. So this is the tassel. Now here we're going to get the super sharp scissors out again. And that's when we're going to give our tassel. I like to cut things off at kind of an angle. And so like if this is kind of flat, I will cut this. I didn't do a very good job with that, but I like it to be at a sharper angle. And so I'm just going to go through and cut this like so. Now, if you wanted to, you could, if you're working with like wax linen or something else like that, you could go back through and tie beads onto it and do some knotting. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do. And you can even do this if you're impatient. You can go in and do multiple loops at a time. The only thing though is that if you get kind of wonkadoodle like how I just did right now, is they can be really kind of messed up, but that's all right. We got stuff to do. But the thing is, if you cut kind of quick like that, it can kind of fray the edges. And so then you have to be more mindful about going through and cutting it at an angle that helps making it a little bit cleaner of an edge. And then anywhere else that they've got this kind of where I haven't cut it, I'll go through and cut it. So if you take the time, it will look better. If you rush, like I just showed you, it's going to look rushed. And then you just go through and see if there's any ones that you didn't cut. I think I got them all. I thought there was one straggler, but anyway, so what I'll do is sometimes if I do a ton of I think there's one. So what I'll go through is I'll go in and I'll cut all of these at an angle on the diagonal. And that's going to help, in my mind, I think it's going to help it from fraying. I don't know if it actually does that or not, but anyway, so there's this. And then if I wanted to make this into a necklace, like I said, I could take some chain. And if I want to, I'm going to try to clean up as I go so I don't make William's desk a mess with all these little ribbon giblets. Is I can just take this and make an over the head necklace by measuring this out. I usually measure this over my head and make sure it's comfortable to take it on and off my head. And then what I'll do is I'll cut it and then I will use a jump ring and attach it. And that's how you can make a very quick necklace. And that's how you do that. Now, if you were curious about how to make a chain tassel, it's basically the same thing, but instead of folding it around, you cut off lengths of chain, smaller lengths of chain, and then when you go in, you take that hook and you go into the last link of each chain, and then that's how you can do that. Now, if you want this to come down like a loop, so that it's not all free flowing and it's like this, then you just put it through both ends of that. Now, one of the reasons why we're only putting it through the last bit of chain, the last link of the chain, is if you try to do this wrapping technique, like how we did the ribbon, this will get super, super bulky and it's not going to want to fit into the cone nice and smooth. So if you want to make that's how you do that. Now, I guess we could do that. What do y'all think? Should we do it, or do you want to do something else in life? I guess I'll just do it, and if you want to keep watching, you can keep watching. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I've got this brass wire. It's 24 gauge. This one, I actually will use this as 24 gauge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off probably 6 lengths at about 3 inches or so. And I've got some beads off to the side. I've got some fun kind of dagger beads, and I'm going to use those. All right. Amanda says, I would like to see how you make it with chain. Oh, good. Jenna says, love these. I see tassels in my future. Oh, good. Well, Sally says, yes, please. I'm trying to learn tassels. All right. So let's do it. So I'll put this in the view so you can admire that. All right. So right now what I'm doing is I'm preparing, whenever I'm making something like this, like a project where I have a lot of repetition of the same thing, I will cut out my wire all at the beginning of my project. And then that way I just kind of have to pick it up and go. Usually I work directly off this spool. But when I have a project like this where I have a lot of repetition, I'll line everything up first and I'll make sure that I have everything ready to go, right? Right, so these are some check glass dagger beads. I don't know if these I don't think these are in the online store, um, but I like them. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bend the wire in half. Notice I'm not making a crisp bend. I've got a little bit of room to play in there. And that way we don't end up cracking our beads because they are glass. And even though glass is a sturdy and very versatile material, it can crack and it can break. So you want to make sure that you're working also with a dead soft wire, because if you work with a wire that is not, you can also chip or crack your beads. All right, and then I just string up my dagger in there. If it's not moving on smoothly, don't force it. Just open it up slightly and then close it up like that. All right, because if you force it, you will break that little tip off. Um, Marianne says, I like larger tassels like your ribbon one, but I have a ton of small pre-made tassels that I don't really like. Well, you can always double stuff them, um, wire them all together, um, or do them in like a layer. You know, you could ombre them or something. All right. So all I'm doing right now is I'm stringing this up. This is like a production mode. The other thing that's nice about this is if you do it this way, sometimes the holes will kind of get filled up, and um then you kind of have to play around, especially if they're in a loose. If they're strung up on like a cord, then you know that the hole will accommodate it. But sometimes if you buy like daggers in particular, sometimes those come loose. Sometimes the holes will be full. And I mean, you can make it so it works. So you can pop. Sometimes you can pop out whatever's in the hole, um, but sometimes you can't. So it's good to know in case you have to get more. Um, and you could do this with like hundreds of things, and you can wire this on really good. All right. So I've got this like so. I've got this U shape, and I'm going to move this over this wire down, and I'm going to cross this over like so. All right, like my TV antenna. I am not being super tight at this point. All right, and then I'm going to bend this one up, and then I'm just going to wrap this around. And at this point, I'm just using my fingers. And this is a messy wrap, y'all. This is not a super tight machined look. Um, and as I get closer to the end, I'm going to get those pliers out because they're smaller than my fingertips. And then I'm going to wrap this around and use my pliers. Now, it does take a little bit of practice, I will say that, because sometimes, because you're working with a very small little amount of glass as the thing that's holding your wire in place, it's very, very easy to accidentally twist this in a way that chips off. So just be careful. All right, so I've got that. I've wrapped this around, and then I'm going to get those round nose pliers out, and I'm going to um, go up about a half an inch, bend this over, insert this back in. Now, I know that this is not the way that most people wire wrap, make wire wrap loops, but because you do have to have a little bit more of a gentle touch with this. But if you do it, you know, it works fine. I've made millions of these, and they still all hold. So, all right. So I'm going to repeat that again. And this is a more loosey-goosey flavor. So if you want this to be more machined, you can go in and get a little bit tighter. I don't like it to be too tight because if it's too tight, you risk it. Um, there's more of a chance that you will break your bead. And then that's a good thing also to remember. If you're doing this, it might be good to wear safety glasses um, if you are concerned, because sometimes that stuff can fly around and you don't want to have glass in your eye. All right. So I'm just going to repeat this for the remaining beads that I have. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, depending on where you make your loop, it will determine on here, depending on where you make your loop. If you make it closer to the tip, it's going to be a smaller hole or a smaller loop. If you make it closer to the base, it's going to be a bigger loop. Now, if you make a bigger loop, that can be a fun decorative element, but I will say you're going to need more wire. And the reason why is if you don't give yourself enough wire to do this and you don't make that little cap there, I don't know if you can see that or not. If you don't give yourself that little cap, this is going to want to weeble wobble all over. And that's fine if you want that kind of look. But for the most part, I don't necessarily want it to be all wandering around town. So I like it to be a little bit tighter. And that is good. Now, if you want to make, I did a tutorial on this a long time ago on taking epoxy putty and using that to hide and embellish those ends. So if you ever want to do that, you can definitely do that. It's fun. I think I taught that on a TV show. So yeah. So I'm just going to repeat this. Hopefully, y'all are having a good Tuesday evening. And notice I haven't closed up. I have not closed up the loops in my wire wrap loops. So if you're wondering why I'm kind of just abandoning them at a certain stage, that's why. Is I'm going to get them all to kind of the same point, and then once I get them to that point, then I can just add them all. And so it's really good practice, to it's really good practice to do these, because then you make a lot of them and you get really more comfortable with wire wrapping. I know when I first started wire wrapping, I was not comfortable with it and I broke a lot of beads and I had a lot of problems and I was really disappointed with how it looked. And when I first started doing wire wrapping, I wanted everything to be like machined look. I wanted it to be like super, all the coils to be super tight and have everything be super clean. Nowadays, I like a messy wrap, especially when you antique it and you can get all that detail of the wire and it's kind of like a bird's nest kind of effect. I love that look. And so that's where my heart lies. I know some people like it a little bit cleaner. If you want to do that, I would say just making it a little bit tighter. And yeah. All right. Um, Michelle says, my coils are not neat. If it all depends what you like. If you want a tighter coil, you just have to make it tighter. The thing about making them tighter, though, is there's more of a chance that you will break your piece. And that is something that can happen. I would also, if you want it to look like a cap, and to come down further on your bead, you just need more wire. So if you want that to come down and really be kind of like to wrap the top of it, um, then I would just cut more wire and you just keep wrapping. And then that's a good way of getting in there. Um, Ronnie says, would you also make the wire cap for gemstone briolets, or do you have a simple loop at that point? I don't like to do simple loops. I think simple loops, I appreciate their simplicity, but I also, if you lightly pull, then it's gone forever. Um, so for me, I like to have a more wrapped loop. Um, for myself. I know some people, they like that kind of rosary chain where they just do one loop. If you do things like that with just one loop and you don't wrap it, what I would recommend is using a harder wire, and that will make sure you'll make sure that that wire doesn't come loose. And be too soft. Because if it's too soft, that's gonna be what happens. It's gonna come loose. All right. So I'm just gonna wrap this around and put this on here like that. And so I've got all these components lined up, and then we have a choice. I have this paper clip chain, and this will be option A. And I also have this kind of gold plated matte gold cable chain. So this will be B. So do you think I should do A, or B? And it's up to you. I'll pick the one with the most votes. So A or B? Bonnie says option A is my favorite. Susan says A. A is winning so far. Janice says A. Lorraine says A. Sharon says A. I think A is going to be the winner, I think. Michelle says A. I don't think I've seen one B. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is determine the length that we need to make this. You could make this any length. If you want this to be like down to your navel, you could make this, 6 foot long tassel. I will say that that is a recipe for Tangle Nation. So if you don't want to have tangling, then don't do it. Now, so there's two options about how you do this. You can do this where you fold this over like so, and then you will when you wire this in, you'll use just this one clip. Now, this is a soldered chain, so that's good for that. So if you want to do that, you can do it like this. This is if you're going to do a very bulky chain or bulky tassel. Like if you had like 20 chains or whatever, or if you wanted 20 kind of tassels, then you would take 10 pieces of chain and fold it over and find the middle link, and use that. If you are doing something where there's 6 tassels like this, or how many did I have? I have 6. All right. If you have 6 of these, it doesn't necessarily matter as much because this is a very fine chain. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're going to do something with like a bunch of tassels or a bunch of threads in your tassel. Um, Now here's a fun kind of decorative or um, it's a design choice. So in theory, you can make them all the same length. Um, Sometimes it's fun to have them at different lengths so you can stagger them. Um, and this is also one of these things, one of the projects that I call a stash buster. And what that means is I always like projects that you use like leftover bits and you can like take advantage of all the kind of little giblets and you can like use a lot of beads and things that normally you may only have one or two of, or you know you have all these little bits of chain that like if you want it to make a chain like a necklace with a specific length of chain, you have to trim the chain. And so I ended up with a little box of all different kinds of leftover chain bits, especially at the store. Sometimes you get down to the end of the spool and you end up with just a little bit of chain. Now, so what I'm doing is I'm cutting this off and I'm going to remove this cut link. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I find that that ends up, I hate to waste it, but I'm not going to solder it. And number two is it's weakened at that point. Um, so it's not necessarily useful to me. So I just cut that off and take it off. Um, and sometimes when you have a bigger chain, it's not as much of an issue because, or if you're using a chain that isn't soldered, the links aren't soldered, then just open your links um, and then you don't have to cut. Because I've seen where people will cut an open link chain. I'm like, why don't you just open the link? So I'm cutting right now 6 links, and they're different lengths because I want these to be a little bit staggered of this chain. All right. Um, and I've got 5 now, and then I'm going to go for 6. Now I can always trim this if I'm not happy with the way this looks. I can always kind of adjust it, and that's always an option for me. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this. Um, so I've got all these beads lined up, and I'm going to take the ends of this wire here and slip this onto that loop, that wire wrap loop. And then what I do is I will hold this one side stationary so it doesn't move around and I don't lose my loop here. And I will just wrap this around. Now, if you want to do this, if you have a really long wire, you can wrap this around where you're kind of making like a frosty swirl into your piece. The nice thing about having a messy wire wrap is that you can easily tuck this into your coil and it's going to be fine. You're not going to have that little point sticking out. All right. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to just gently squeeze this to make sure that it's flattened and not kind of wonkadoodle. And then there you go. And then another thing that I'll do is I'll kind of run my finger around this. And then that's maybe not the best test, but it does alert you to anything where you might have to tuck some wire in and do that. Of course, I bent that at a weird angle and it looks like it. All right. So there you go. And then you just repeat this for those 6 little bits of chain. And yeah. So basically, there's a lot of repetition that happens in this kind of pattern. It's not something that I also, when I'm working with chain, sometimes you'll see me put my finger out and I'll let the chain drape like this over that finger. And what that is allowing me to do is it's going to prevent that chain from getting caught up in the tail of my wire that I'm wrapping around. I don't want that to get caught into the chain and constantly get in the way. All right. Ronnie says, yes, I love mixing bits of leftover chain together, adds interest, or combine the same chain but in different finishes in a piece, makes simple earrings. Yeah, there is an artist, her name is Lisa Levine. And when I lived in Brooklyn, her studio and showroom was around the corner from where I used to live. And it was in between where I lived and the train station. So I would oftentimes like pop in and see what she's making. And she would get all this vintage chain and kind of run it through a rolling mill or do all kinds of funky stuff or make these great big tangles of chain. And when I say tangles of chain, I'm not exaggerating. Usually you don't want your chain to tangle, but she was like, I'm going to embrace it. And she would sell these necklaces, and it was all this like tangled chain. And to make it different, she would, we didn't do this one. To make it different, she would use like different bits of chain, different kinds of chain, and it would kind of give it a really cool texture. And so, yeah, I really like using uh, different bits of chain. Also, I think it's I love to go to like the vintage places and buy different chains. And sometimes, you get, a lot of different things. We do, I don't know if we have them still listed in the online store. It's allegorygallery.com. And we used to sell bags of chain ends, and I used to get a lot of different vintage chain, and we would put it into those kind of bags. Those are really good if you want to do something with like a mixed metal look. That's super awesome for that. They're also really good if you have a piece that you're doing a repair on, but you don't have an old chain. Sometimes the chain will get, metal will patina over time. And sometimes if you use a modern or a contemporary chain, it'll be like bright and shiny. And sometimes you don't necessarily want it to be like bright and shiny and new looking. You want it to have that vintage look. So that's where those chain bags are really handy, because then you can take a little small piece, and then that little small piece, it looks like it was meant to be because it's from that same time period or has that same kind of patina. So yeah, Amanda says, I'm sure they chose. Oh, they're talking about a reality TV show, y'all. Um, and so, anyways, so that chain, if you use if you want that to kind of blend together in a design, you can do that, by using those vintage chain kind of mixed bags. And you can get those on our website. All right. Or we used to sell them. I don't know if we have them anymore. And today's a full moon, y'all. Did y'all know that? Michelle says, Andrew, this looks fun. It's very meditative. And you know what? I tried to get chain, I tried to cut different lengths of chain. And you know what I did? I cut like two that are different lengths. And if you wanted to just add an ear wire, call it a day. Those could be really fun. That's actually, I wouldn't mind that look. But anyways, that's a different design for a different day. I'm going to cut some of these a little bit shorter so that I have a little bit more variation in my staggering. Because right now I have a bunch. Now, these ones, they're soldered. And so I'm going to just keep these. And I have a little tin that I put those in. And I like them because you can get, you can use those. Now these ones that I've cut, they're not as useful, but the ones that are not, the ones that are soldered, I just keep those off to the side, and I'll keep those because they can be really useful. You can do all kinds of stuff. So what I like to do is I will lay them out and kind of roughly eyeball how things are going to lay. And what I mean by that is I'll lay them out and then I'll see if I need to add short ones or long ones and then adjust appropriately so that they're all kind of hitting at a different point. Because it's easier to do this now than to do it after. It's not impossible, but it's just easier when you lay it out first. And what I will sometimes do is I'll put like longer ones towards the center, and then I'll put shorter ones on the outer edge. Um, and that I think helps with that kind of look as well. And then usually I work in odds, which I did not do this time. So I might do one more real fast so that I can have that be an odd number kind of thing. And one of the reasons why is, I don't know, it kind of looks like something's dingle dangling. Um, if you have two, if you do have two, I would say make the proportions exaggerated. So if you have one that's like way down low and then one that's higher, it tricks the eye into thinking that you have a shorter one as opposed to a longer one. All right, so I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to get down to the meat and potatoes of this design, this chain tassel. I wasn't even planning on doing this, so I'm glad I had this off to the side and ready to be set up. All right, so I've cut this in half, or I've cut this length off. It's about 3 inches. I'm not going to be super tight on this. I don't want that U or that V to be super crisp because I don't want to crack the bead. If it's not going, don't force it. Pry it open a little bit, and then you can go over, cross over the wires like so. Pull one straight up, and then the other one will wrap around and just gently wrap it around. You don't want to use too much force or torque because you can chip or crack the bead, and then you have a little bit of something, something for a collage or a mosaic, I guess, or a sculpture. Before you get down to the end of the tip of the wire, I'll bring out my pliers. And one thing that I'm not doing, you may notice that I'm using my fingers more in this design than normal. And part of the reason why is sometimes with the wire, you can feel the wire and how much it is, how much it's, how tightly you're going. But if you're using the pliers, sometimes you don't have that hand feel to tell you how tight you are going. So I'm going to put this on here, put that onto the length of the chain that I pre-cut. I'm going to close this up with this side while I'm wrapping. Extend my fingers so the chain's out of the way, and then just wrap this around and coil it into that bead cap. All right. And because my wire wrap loop is messy, I can tuck that in my little bird's nest and nobody knows and it won't get caught on stuff. That's another important thing is you don't want it to get caught. on your clothing. All right. So I'm going to put this over here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I did in the first kind of thing. I'm going to cut off about approximately 6 inches. And that's not 6 inches. That's more like 4.5 or 5. And then I'm going to make a hook with my round nose pliers. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to string this on and put them on the very end link of each thing onto that little hook of wire that we made. All right. So here we go. Now I haven't closed this up, and the reason why is that if I do this and I hate it, I can adjust the lengths of this. Howdy.
Hello. What are you making today?
I made this tassel. We're talking about tassels and those cones.
Look how pretty that is. Oh, your camera doesn't do it.
I told you.
I can't. I don't want to look while you're on.
He's gonna do
Check
something.
your settings. Let me see. You don't have the setting? No.
See, he doubted me, y'all.
Oh.
All right. So the other thing that I'm going to do, and it's a kind of a visual thing, is to kind of imagine it where how that's going to come out of the tassel. Because if you have it where there's too much of a gap between the beads, it could look cool if you have enough, but if you don't have enough, it can look very odd. It's like somebody wearing pants that are too big. So, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You could do like multiple ones and kind of stuff them up there. And that can be fun. All right. So when you're happy with how this is laid out, what you can do is pull this over and you'll make this wire come up like this. And like I said in the earlier video, for this part of this wire, like for this part, this wire is fine for this. This is actually a good gauge of wire. 24 gauge is great for this kind of wire wrapping down here. But for this bail making part, I would definitely use a heavier gauge and my normal, like if I made it for real, for real. All right, so I'm going to gently hold this at the very tip with that round nose pliers, and then I'm just going to go in here and wrap it pretty tightly. I don't want to squeeze it to the point where it will kink up the wire, because if you do it too tight, it can make it won't have enough room for the chain to move, and it can cause some really weird like kinking and stuff's kind of splaying out in wonkadoodle ways. So, and if this is not the most perfect wire wrap ever, nobody's hardly going to see that, so it's not the end of the world. And then I'm going to slip this on to this and see how I like it. So that's pretty fun. So I'm going to get another bead. I'm going to use this for maybe a white bead. And I'm going to string this on. And this is so that loop doesn't fall back in there. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to go up about an inch or so and wrap it around my pliers. And then I'm just going to keep wrapping so it kind of doubles up that wire, that bail. And then I'm going to take this, my other pliers, and wrap this around. I'm just going to coil it. And I'm using, notice I am not holding on for dear life on this side. So I've noticed a lot of times when I see beginners do it, they don't want to let go. And so the end of this wire gets all kinds of mangled up and chewed up. And then you just have to cut it later. And so I don't like that. So I'm going to cinch that in and then tuck that under my loop. And this kind of has a very kind of, I don't know, a little bit of a, I think it's the color combination, but it's giving me kind of like, so you can do this. So there's two examples of, you can get two versions of these tassels. So that's using these AG Fine Pewter tassels or combs that we sell on our website. And I've got this version, which is a ribbon version. And also, you don't have to use just the same medium either. So if you want something where you combine these, you could combine chain and ribbon. And, you kind of have to do it, plan it out. But if you wanted to do wax linen in there, also, you could add a lot of texture. So it doesn't have to be just one kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be one fiber if you wanted this. And then with this one, you could definitely add things onto the chain and embellish the chain so it has a fuller look. And you can add a little bit more movement that way with some wire up head pins. But I kind of like how that looks. And I probably would if I did this in hindsight and I had a little bit more time, I probably would double the number of chains. And that way it's got um, double the number of it. So it's a lot fuller and has a little bit more movement. And then we have that nice kind of cascade of those daggers. So there you go. All right. Hopefully you all enjoyed that. We have two different tassels. And then to make this into a necklace, all you would have to do is just, put this on a chain, and that's easy peasy style. Or if you wanted to do it, you could do wire wrap chain. This would look really good with like a rosary chain. To give you that illusion. Now, another thing that you can do is William showed some bail making pliers yesterday. And if you use a bigger gauge wire, like a heavier gauge wire, and you made this bail much larger, and if you don't have bail making pliers, you could use a dowel rod or something like that. The thing about using a dowel rod is that over time it will kind of dent up. But there, if you don't want to have another set of pliers, which I always want another set of pliers, but if you wanted to do that, if you made this big enough, you can slip the chain onto that bail through there, and then it can just dangle off of that instead of using a jump ring or, using like permanent connection where there. Now, another thing we could do, and I'll do this really fast so you can see it, is if you have a bunch of jump rings and you have jump rings in the right sizes, like I have this, I can open that up. See what I mean? You're going to hold one side stationary. If you watched the video yesterday and you saw the demo or the live on tools, that is really good if you use this for opening and closing jump rings. Now, if you have a gap, you see how there's a gap? All you have to do is open it up and then twist it so that it touches. And you're going to over twist it and then cinch it kind of close like that. And then you can put this on there. The other benefit of doing it in this way is that it takes the pressure off of this. Uh, um, the point of connection becomes this jump ring, which is heavier gauge. If you did put this on there and you did have this 24 gauge wire, it would probably break over time. So just keep that in mind. Um, so that's, something to consider when we're designing our jewelry and selecting materials for our projects, because we don't necessarily want our projects to instantly break. So using a heavier gauge wire will definitely help prevent that. But also adding this jump ring takes that pressure off of this, and this won't be bending back and forth, because if it bends back and forth, you're work hardening the metal until it becomes brittle, and then it'll just snap right off. So there you go. Amanda says, do you keep a nice stash of various beading supplies at home, or do you go to the cottage and grab things? I hardly have anything at the house anymore. When we got the cottage, the idea was to move everything over there so that I kind of had a place to work outside of the home. Because I have this tendency of being a workaholic. So I will just work and work and work, and I never take any breaks. So if I'm at another place, then I kind of know when it's like I can also go, and also since we don't have a bathroom there, I definitely am very cognitive of how long I can work there. Um, I imagine when we do get a bathroom situation like permanently set up there, we'll be able to work there for longer stretches of time. But so generally speaking, I will bring things home, or I have a couple things. I have a travel kit. I just got back from Tucson, so I just happened to have my travel kit with me, and that's how I had the tools I'm using today. But yeah, so there you go. I think that kind of has a cool. I love this purple, this opalescent purple, with that kind of bronzy, brassy, antique color. It has this kind of cool, vintagey, kind of steampunky vibe to it. That contrast, I like that. All right, so that's what I made today, y'all. I'm gonna flip this around and we'll say goodbye. Howdy. So hopefully you all had fun, and I know some of the stuff with like the wire wrapping is not the most exciting thing ever. It's like, like, okay, you showed it once and now you're gonna show it again and again and again. Um, I mean, if you did this this gets a little bit heavy, but if you wanted to make those into earrings, I think those could be really fun. Um, like the cone is a little bit heavy, but I think that could be really cute as an earring. So if you made it smaller, um, then it could be cool. And then we made this. So I probably would add a little bit of something to that chain so that it was a little bit fuller up at the top. Either that or shorten the chains so you get more of the purple and less of the chain action. Either that or I probably would have doubled the amount of chains if I was doing this off camera. So that, because if you all had to sit through me wire wrapping another 6 of these, I could see the numbers dropping to like 2. All right. So hopefully you all had fun. Tomorrow we're gonna kick off some of the gemstones that we picked up in Tucson. We finally have started organizing and getting everything divvied out. So that's been a really big project. I cannot wait for it to be over because our living room currently is covered in bags of gemstones. And we put down a sheet and stuff. and so we could like, nothing gets crunched. It's like you don't go into the, like, you don't walk into that zone. But anyways, I will be so delighted when we reclaim our living room. So we've been working on this for a couple weeks now, sorting everything out and pricing stuff. But we just got the package from my family last week. And so we have been working on getting that all kind of situated. And then we also had Kidapalooza. So that kind of pushed things back a wee bit. But I think that's nice. It gives you, you can have a little bit of a breather in between. So tomorrow we're going to kick off the gemstones, I believe. And then the desert discovery boxes. They should be shipping out probably. Our hope is going to be on Fridays when they'll start going out. Because Barb will be in tomorrow, and that's when she's going to be doing Kidapalooza stuff. So we'll probably start sending out the Desert Discovery boxes on Friday or on Monday, depending on how much we get done. All right. So hopefully you all had fun. If you do decide to make some tassels, share them in the group. That's Allegory Gallery Design Challenges. We have a Facebook group. That's down here is the link for that. And we would love to see your tassel creations. If you make something, with a ribbon like this, or if you make a chain tassel or your own version. I've seen some really cool, this is a really great, what I call a foundation project, because you can build off of it. So if you wanted to add more texture or incorporate seed beading, like if you, instead of daggers, you made beaded beads, or there's all different kinds. You could also, if you are so inclined, you could make your own cone. So if you wanted to make, like peyote stitch, you could make, you kind of plan it so that you have a seam, and then you sew up the seam, and you could make a little seed beaded cone, and then do your tassel out of that. So there's a lot of options that you can do um, in developing this up into something that you can really make your own and incorporate a lot of different techniques. Like if you wanted to do, I know some of y'all out there work in ceramic, you could make your own cones in ceramic and have beads that are in ceramic. That'd be really beautiful. Like I could imagine having a whole necklace, just oversized. That would be like so amazing. I don't know if I would ever make that, but maybe, you never know. All right. So hopefully, I'm going to say it again. Hopefully, you all had a good time, and I'm going to let y'all go. Have a great night, and thank you all for all of your support. We appreciate it. Go check out Kidapalooza on our website, allegorygallery.com, and snap up any of those kits. There's only half of the Touchstone kits, number 50, left. There may be less since I've been on the video, but that one is a big one, and it will probably sell out. So thanks again. Have a great night, and I'll see you later. See ya.